Welcome to the Westcott Crochet channel and welcome to this chevron cowl neck sweater. This one's an easy construction and it's quite quick to work up as it's all double crochet bar the top row of each panel. If there is a written pattern, there'll be a link in the description box. For this project I used about 850 meters of a double knit yarn. It recommended a 4mm hook and I used a 4.5mm hook. I also used a tape measure, stitch markers and a yarn needle. If you enjoy this video, please give a thumbs up and leave a comment to highlight the video. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to support future uploads. You can also follow me on Instagram, and if your account is set to public, do tag me on any pictures of your Westcott crochet projects. I'm going to start today by working a small swatch, just in the chosen stitch pattern. It creates a zigzag, so you do lose width from your original start chain. The pattern calls for a repeat of 8 stitches, so I'm going to start with a swatch of just 32. I have 32 chains. At this point you can either chain an extra 2 and the first 3 will then become your first double crochet, and you'd start your second double crochet into chain number 4, or you can go like me and work a standing double. I'm going to pull up my loop to the height of a double crochet roughly. I'm just going to give it a little twist because I'm working from a start chain. I just want these 2 loops to just be together. Wrap around my hook to form a loop, hold on to the first loop with your forefinger, in through the stitch, or the chain in this instance, and pull back a loop. So effectively got 3 loops on my hook. Yarn over, pull through the first 2, I can now let go, and yarn over, pull through the last 2. And that's my first stitch. From here into the next chain, work my second double, into the next chain, work my third double. So that's 3 in total. So from a start chain, you'd chain an extra 2 on the end of your start chain. So on the end of my 32, I would chain 2 to make 34, and I would start my second double into chain number 4, or standing double it into the first chain, and another double and another double into the following 2 after that. So that's 3 for everybody. I'm going to miss 2, and into the third one, work another double crochet. Oops, twisting around. I'm going to work 2 more into the next 2 chains. So I've got 3 double crochets, a gap of 2 chains, and then 3 more double crochets. Chain 2 into the very next stitch, so don't miss any stitches on the chain. Work a double crochet, and the next 2 after that, 1 in each. So a group of 3 again. So this is how the zigzag starts to form. So I've got 2 missing at the bottom, 2 missing at the top. Now I go for 2 missing at the bottom. So work 3 more stitches. And then I want 2 missing at the top. So I chain 2 into the very next stitch. I start with my next group of 3. So into the stitch after for number 2. And the one after that for number 3. And that's how we work all the way along. So you're skipping 2 at the bottom then at the top, then at the bottom, then at the top. So obviously for the bottom, you just skip your 2 chains, and at the top, you work 2 chains all the way to the end. It's the end of row 1, and I've worked all the way along with my alternating gaps of 2, and the last 3 stitches, I've worked the last 3 double crochets after missing the last 2. So I'm going to turn around, and again you can either do a chain 3 start, and that's your first double crochet, or you can work a standing double into that first stitch. Into that first stitch, I'm also going to put a second double. So whether you chain 3 or you work the standing double, your second double crochet goes into that same stitch. Stitch number 3 goes into the next stitch along. And then I'm going to skip 2. So 1, 2. Same as I did on the row before. So where I skipped 2 chains, I'm skipping 2 stitches into the third one. I start my next cluster of 3. So 1, number 2 goes into the next stitch, and number 3 goes into the chain 2 space. And then, copying the row below, I'm going to chain 2. And the first of the next batch of 3 goes into the chain 2 space also. And then I work the next 2 into the next 2 stitches along. So I'm literally copying what's gone on the row before, but obviously that was a start chain. So it's just stitches instead of chains. So again, I'm skipping 2, same as before. Work my 3, 1, 2 stitches. Third goes into the chain 2 space, and I chain 2. First one of the next batch of 3 goes into the chain 2 space, and the next 2 stitches along for the next 2. And here I am again, I'm going to skip 2, work 3, chain 2, work 3, skip 2, work 3. Here at the end, and just as we started with 2 stitches at the beginning, we're going to end with 2 stitches. So the third of your last batch of 3 goes into that last stitch along with number 2. And that will eventually, once it stops misbehaving and curving after a few rows, it creates a straight line up the edge. So from here it's just a repeat of row 2 until you get the length that you want. So I'm going to turn around. Again, I'm going to start with 2 stitches. So you're either chaining 3 and working a second double crochet into the same first stitch, or you're going to work a standing double and a second double crochet into that first stitch. And then your third, and then you're skipping 2, work 3 more, 1, 2, and the third one in the chain 2 space, chaining 2, number 1 goes into the chain 2 space, 2, next one along, 3, and then I'm back to a skipping 2. And so on until you get all the way to the end, where you'll work 2 stitches again into the last stitch. I've worked just 5 rows on the swatch, and the sides now are going upright. They've stopped curving, which means I can take an accurate measurement of my stitch pattern. I'm going to work 2 panels, a front and a back panel. I need it to go all the way around my body, so I need to measure the widest part of my upper body all the way around and divide that by 2. So for me that's 48, 96 all the way around the widest part, 48 is half of that. So I need to make sure that my front panel and back panel measure at least 48 centimetres, more if I want a looser fit. So now, with that 48 in mind, I take a measurement of the group of 8 stitches anywhere. It's 2 sets of 3. And I get 5.5 centimetres. If I take my 48 and divide the 5.5 centimetres into that, that comes up with 8.72. I'm going to round that up to 9. So I'm going to have 9 times 8 for my start chain, so 72. I worked my 72 stitches for 39 rows, and this takes me up to the tops of my shoulder. I'm going to work one more row, and in doing so I'm going to close off the wavy line along the shoulder. I'm going to keep it going across the neck opening here, and I'm going to close it off on the other shoulder. So my neck opening I've marked out, for me it's just 4 of these little humps. If you end on a peak instead of a trough, you're going to have a slight difference this next row, and I'm going to demonstrate both options, starting with the option that I have here where I'm ending in the dips. For everybody it starts the same across the shoulder. It's only when you get to either a dip or a peak that the difference comes in. So for everybody, chain 1 and turn around. Single crochet into stitch number 1, and then a half double crochet into that same stitch. So yarn over, in through the stitch, pull back a loop, yarn over, pull through 3 loops for a half double. Next stitch gets a double, and then I'm going to skip 2 as normal. Next stitch gets a double. The one after that, half double, and into the chain 2 space I'm going to put a single. So that's my group of 3, double, half double, single. Over here I had single, half double, double. In the chain 2 space, I'm not going to chain 2, I'm going to add an extra single crochet instead. And then I start the next batch of 3, so single, half double, double. Skipping 2, next batch of 3, double, half double, single. Single in place of the chain 2, next batch of 3, single, half double, double. And here's where the change comes in, because I'm at my neck opening. So if you're ending in a dip like me, you're just going to jump straight across now and carry on the pattern as normal. So you skip your 2, work double, and it's doubles all the way across to the next marker in the usual pattern. So groups of 3 still, 1, 2 and 3, chain 2, back to that, and your next batch of 3. I'm going to work all the way across my neck and just show how the dip option works out on the other side, and then I'll come back. So I'm back. I've got the flat shoulder on one side, wavy across the neck, and I'm back to flatten out the shoulder on the other side. So again, for the dip option, which is option 1, I go straight in after skipping my 2 stitches and work my double. Then I'm going to half double and single. Single in place of the chain 2, oops, sorry. And then the next batch of 3 is single, half double, double. And then work along, sorry, to the end in the same way. So I'm just going to undo this and come back and show how to end on a peak. So I've pulled that all out, and I'm now preparing to end my shoulder section on a peak. So I've gone across the shoulder as normal, as before. It's exactly the same process, just to flatten that out. I'm going to work the final 3 stitches along the shoulder flattening, and then show what I do at the peak here. So miss 2 for the last last cluster of 3, double, half double, oops, and single. And then I'm just going to move that out of the way because it's a bit of a fuss. This is where I'm going back into the neckline. So that's my shoulder finished off. Here's my neckline. I'm going to chain one only and then work my first double into that chain 2 space, and then second and third, and then I'm working the pattern as normal again. That's the original pattern, not the shoulder flattening pattern. So I'll go across to the other marker and I'll be back there. So back at the other side of the neck opening, I'll work 1 stitch, 2 and 3 is in the chain 2 space, and again I chain 1 to come down the other side with a single crochet. I'm starting the shoulder with that single crochet. Half double, double, skip 2, double, half double and single. So same story the other side. Single on the chain 2, in space of, sorry. Next batch of 3, single, half double, double, and work towards the other edge. Onto the last stitch at the corner here, I've just worked a double, and now have to work a half double into stitch and the final stitch, sorry, and also a single into that same stitch, and that's what that looks like. So again, we've got flat, still ridges on the neck opening and flat on the other shoulder, and that's the same regardless of whether you ended in a dip or a trough, as it were. So take those out now. Just remember when you come to seaming up your shoulder that your shoulder ends in that single crochet before the chain 1 space if you've ended on this option 2. Whilst editing the footage, it occurred to me that to eliminate gaps on the first round of the collar, it would work best if you work 1 further stitch on your seam, your shoulder seam. So you're actually including 2 of your collar stitches into that seam, and then you work those 2 stitches again for the first round of the collar. So basically slip stitch through 1 extra stitch on each side for your seam, and then work those 2 stitches again as part of your first round on your collar. Final thing to finish off this panel, chain 1 at the end. I've left a tail end to seam up the shoulder. Pull that through and you're all good to go. Once you've finished 1 panel, you need to make another one exactly the same way. I now have 2 identical panels and I've lined them up with the outsides facing each other on the inside so that I can seam up the shoulders. I still have my yarn attached after completing panel number 2, so I'm just going to go straight on from here. If you've got your yarn cut, at this point attach a slip knot and chain 1 to secure. Into stitch number 1 on both sides. Actually, I'll just come in a bit closer. There we go, in through stitch number 1 on both sides, and just pull through a loop and pull through your existing loop to slip stitch. Again, in through the stitch on one side, next stitch on the other side, pull through everything to slip stitch. I'm going to do that all the way across the area I've flattened out for my shoulder. So if you ended on a peak, that's just before your chain 1 is your last stitch. And for me, it's this stitch here on the last cluster of 3. Again, in either instance, do work 1 extra seam stitch to eliminate gaps on the first round of the collar. There I've worked my first shoulder seam. I'm going to chain 1 to secure that, cut my yarn and pull that through. This is what the seam looks like on the right side. I'm going to work the same seam on the other side and I'll come back. I'm all seamed up on both shoulders and I'm now right side out. I'm going to work on the collar and I'm going to work the collar in a round. Just keep going round and round. Well, I'll go round and back the other way and round back the other way. I need to start the round at a peak. So for me, it's not going to be centre because here's my centre and it's at a trough. So I need to start at a peak in order to turn around seamlessly. I'm just going to work a slip knot. Add that on and pull through. And just chain one to tighten that up. Right, here you can either chain 3, and that's your first double crochet, but I do recommend for the seamless seam that you start working the standing double. It's not difficult, it might take a couple of practices, but especially when you're working not from a start chain, it's a lot easier. So I'll just demonstrate again, up with the loop, height of a double, plant your finger on the loop to hold it firm, wrap it around your hook, in through the stitch, pull back a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and then carrying on the pattern. So that's number 1 of the cluster of 3, and now I've got 3, jump the 2, and over to the other side. I'm going to carry on with the pattern as standard until I get to the seam. I'll be back then. I'm here at the shoulder seam, that's here, and I'm on to the last stitch in my cluster of 3. Technically, this is the seam stitch here and here, and this is the stitch that I miss, and this is the stitch that I miss on the other side. But because of the seam stitches, it leaves quite a gaping hole. So I'm actually going to, for my last on the cluster of 3, I'm going to work 2 together. So I wouldn't normally work this stitch, but I'm going to just on the seam on this first round. So yarn over in through, sorry, I'll start that again. Yarn over for the double in through the stitch, pull back a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over in through stitch number 2, pull back a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 3 loops. So I've effectively created another stitch just to fill that gap a little bit, but I'll still have 1 stitch top so that the next round works properly. So again on the other side, these are going to be the 2 that I'm missing now, which, as I say, is technically the seam, but it would leave a big gaping hole if I lose that and then skip this other stitch as well. So again, I'm going to work the 2 together on the other side. And then that just leaves a much more standard gap. Try it both ways, but I think you'll find, as I did, that it just leaves too big a gap. I don't mind the gap because it matches the pattern, but not when it's too huge. So that worked better. If you are the other version and you had a chain 1 at the start of either side of your seam, in that instance, you'd work your double crochet in 1 chain 1 on one side of your seam, you'd chain 2, and you'd work your other double crochet on the other side of the seam in your chain 1 space and carry on as normal. So where am I there? That was 1 technically, and then there's 2, that's 2, and that's 3. And I'll work around to the other seam and I'll do the same again. I've worked all the way around and I'm back around to the start. I've got the last 3 stitches to work. I'm just going to zoom in a touch. Okay. So 3 stitches to go. I've just worked that last cluster of 3, jump the 2. So 1, 2, and number 3 goes in the chain 2 space. So I move my tail end out of the way. And then I need to chain 2 and slip stitch into that first stitch from the start of the round. And that's how I close each round. Oops, if it'll let me. There we go. So I've got a complete circuit. Now I'm going to turn around and go back the other way. Now I'm just going to spin it. Bear with me. Okay. So to turn around, I need to start over in this corner of the chain that I've just worked. So I need to slip stitch around the chain once, pull it nice and tight so it's flat, and then I go into the actual stitch, the chain, so it's the first of the 2 chains, and I'm going to again slip stitch And from here you'd work your chain 3 or your standing double and start your round again. So on we go, pattern as standard, all the way around. I'll be back at the end of this round just to close off again and start the next one. Last cluster of 3 again at the end of the round, skipping my 2, 1, stitch number 2 might be a bit twisted, but just force your way in there. And stitch number 3 goes around the chain, which again is a little bit bulkier because you've slip stitched back across it, but that's okay. Chain 1, chain 2, and slip stitch into stitch number 1, the top of. So from here again, turning around, slip stitch around the chain, slip stitch into the chain. Oops, just flip it around, it's turned on me. So into the actual loop, just to anchor yourself into position, and then start again. Just make sure you pull your slip stitches fairly tight so that they're flat, and you don't want to leave like a bubbly slip stitch because it will look obvious then that the turn is there. And just keep going with your rounds and do as many rounds as you need for the length of collar that you want. I'll be back when I'm done. I worked for 12 rounds on the neck. Here's my turning seam, which is pretty invisible. I'm going to now seam up the side and add a sleeve. Just going to twist myself side on. So this is the bottom corner. Goes all the way up one side, all the way down the other. I'm going to work a single crochet row all the way around this edge. Actually, first I'm going to turn inside out, so I'll be back in a minute. Okay, I'm inside out now. I'm at the bottom corner and my hook is just in at that very bottom corner stitch. So I'm going to put on a slip knot, pull it through and chain 1. Okay, so all along this edge I've got the start or end of each row, so there's double crochet. Into each double crochet round about the middle, the centre spot, I'm going to put 2 single crochets. I'm just going to zoom in. So here's the first stitch, first double crochet along the side. I'm going to, as I say, go straight in for the middle. I've already chained 1 after adding the slip knot. So there's 1, and in the same spot, the second one. Next stitch is here, so same again. Just poke your way in wherever you can. Try and get a couple of loops so that you get a good firm grab. Second one in the same spot. Next stitch, same deal. 1 and 2. I'm going to do that all the way up this side. When I get to the top, I have the single crochet that I started that final round with, and I have that on both sides. So 1 stitch in there, across to the side of the seam, 1 stitch in there, and then 2 all the way down again to the bottom. So I've worked all the way up one side with a single crochet, all the way down the other side, and now I'm going to seam up the side in using those stitches. I've just marked out where I want my sleeve opening to be, and I've decided that my sleeve width will be 3 repetitions of the pattern, and for that I need 3 lots of 8, so that's 24. 24 down one side, 24 down the other side, and I've marked the 25th stitch on both sides, so I will seam up the side from the bottom corner all the way up and including the 25th stitch here. And it's exactly the same as when I seamed up the shoulders. I'll just come in close and go through it again. So starting from the bottom corner, in through stitch number 1 on one side, stitch number 1 on the other, and slip stitch. And it's simple as that, all the way up to and including, as I say, the marked stitches, which is where my arm opening starts. I'll slip stitch my way up and I'll come back. I've worked the entire seam and I've turned myself back the right way around. Just fed my yarn ball through my arm opening so that I'm all right side out. The single crochet row was worked in this direction. So I'm going to now turn and go in this direction around the arm opening. So I'm changing direction. So you're heading in the pointy end of the stitch, in the direction that the pointy end faces. So there was my marked stitch that I slip stitched up to for my seam. If you're working a chain 3 start now, you need to slip stitch into this first stitch. So not the marked stitch where you've just worked your seam, into the next stitch and then work your chain 3. I'm just going to work my standing double into that stitch. And I'm on for the pattern as usual. So 3, skip 2, 3 more, chain 2, and so on. And then it's just the same as the working round on the collar. I'll finish with a chain 2 and I'll slip stitch into stitch number 1, slip stitch back on myself twice, and then go back the other way. So here we are at the end. I've finished with the chain 2 and slip stitched into the first stitch. And then from here, same as the collar, the neck, slip stitch once around the chain, slip stitch once into the chain, the first one, and I'm ready to go back the other way, starting with a double. So I'm just going to keep going in rounds now until I get the length of the sleeve that I want. After 30 rounds, I have a completed sleeve. Here's my turn seam. I worked the same side seam and 30 rounds on the other side to get the second sleeve, obviously. And I've got a bunch of ends to weave in. I'm done. After all of that, you should have something like this. Do let me know how you got on in the comments section. Thanks to everyone out there who's supporting the channel, and thanks for watching today.